Welcome to the More Perfect Union, the podcast that offers real debate without the hate. I'm Kevin Kelton, a moderate Democrat in California, and I'm joined by...
Rebecca Kushmiter, a Megan Rapinoe fan who is not in jail like Jeffrey Epstein from Kensington, Maryland.
There's a lot to unpack in that.
It's been a good day.
DJ McGuire, also a Megan Rapinoe fan, who is quite happy that Jeffrey Epstein is in jail, from Suffolk, Virginia.
And Greg Matuzak, a common sense liberal who's fan of all women's soccer and all things like that. From Cincinnati, Ohio. For the record, Rebecca, you stole my complete opening. That's exactly what I was going to say. I'm so lit right now.
Yeah, we couldn't decide whether we were more thrilled that the women's soccer team, the U.S. soccer team, won the finals or that Jeffrey Epstein is in jail. To us, there was a flip of the coin. It was a wonderful weekend all around.
I mean, the whole weekend, since he went to jail, I've been having these moments like, hey, I slept in this morning. You know who didn't sleep in? Jeffrey Epstein. Because he's in jail.
Because he's in jail.
Where they don't look too fondly on child molesters. Hey, folks, don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes and Apple Podcasts. We're also on Stitcher and Spotify. Please look for us there. And please follow us on Twitter at #MPU Podcast and on Instagram at MPU Fan Club. Well, everybody, there's a lot to talk about this week, as there always is. But we're going to start with Shakin in California. I'm the only one here who was actually in the quake. I've been in a few before. This one felt very mild to me, but I was far, far, far from the epicenter. Apparently, it was either something like a 7.1 or a 6.9. Does that mean anything to you guys?
No.
It means that the ground moved under your feet, which does not seem optimal to me.
Yeah, it means I'm very glad that I'm on the East Coast.
Yes.
Yeah, I've never been in an earthquake. You know, I wouldn't even know what it's like. So it's got to be frightening.
We had one here, 7 or 8 years ago, and it's really unsettling when your house starts to shake. It's a weird feeling.
You know, I want to point out, I haven't seen anybody mention this on the news, but a 7.1 earthquake is really massive. It's a major, major earthquake. And to my knowledge, please correct me if I'm wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. There was no loss of life in this, and that is actually a miracle.
You're absolutely right, Kevin. That's just very, very fortunate that the epicenter was somewhere where a lot of people aren't.
Yeah, but even in those two small towns that did sit directly on top of it, God bless how it happened, but nobody lost their life. There were a few people lost houses, and some buildings were damaged pretty badly, but yeah, no loss of life.
Well, and
wow.
I mean, let's give it up to architects and engineers who have figured out how to make buildings for the most part safe in an earthquake zone. That's some really good science, and let's give them a lot of credit for being able to assist with that. It's a lot coming together for a good outcome.
And that's why we should throw a national parade.
We should, because that also is a terrible tragedy.
Yes, a national parade with no actual parade.
Right.
So I didn't turn on the TV at all that day. Tell me what I missed. Oh, we're, of course, talking about the 4th of July Trump quote-unquote parade.
There were three major things that happened on the mall on the 4th of July, two of which happen every year. One is a Capitol 4th, which is a PBS production on the lawn of the Capitol. It's a concert. It's always hosted by somebody kind of charming but uncontroversial. This year it was John Stamos and a lot of musicians that maybe aren't headliners. And it's a first come first serve thing. Then there's a National Park Service parade. I think it's down Constitution Avenue, and again, it happens every year. It's got marching bands from all over the place, and it's just a parade. And then Trump did his thing. He was down at the Lincoln Memorial, which is at the opposite end of the National Mall, and it poured rain on him. It poured rain on his teleprompter. It lasted maybe 30 minutes and then it was over. I guess there were some plane flyovers like the Blue Angels and maybe Air Force One. And then the fireworks happened even later than all of that. So it's not like it was Trump and then pyro happened. It was Trump and then 3 hours later the fireworks happened. It was very disconnected. It was like, this is not something Hollywood produced.
Right, because his original idea of actually having the tanks go down the streets and over the bridges were that they would actually destroy the streets because they were so heavy.
I'm still reeling at the news that the best they could do for the 4th of July, forget Donald Trump, this has nothing to do with partisan politics, that the best that this country could do in 2019 was John Stamos?
Yeah.
Okay, listen, it's usually Tom Bergeron from Dancing with the Stars, so I think John Stamos is a step up, and it was being co-hosted by the Sesame Street Muppets. So do not bag on Muppets here, Kevin. but have we talked about the new history point we learned, the new fact about,
No, we have not talked about Airport 1776.
Yeah,
we have
let's
not
talk about
discussed that.
So somebody bring that up who isn't me, please.
Well, DJ actually shared a quote with us. I don't know where you found it.
That was courtesy of David Holt, who is a Facebook friend of mine from Wisconsin, who said that Jefferson Airplane actually came up with their name from the airplane that Jefferson flew during the Revolutionary War. They did not cite a particular battle because Jefferson was actually not in a particuar battle. He was governor of the Revolutionary Government of Virginia at the time.
He was also in France for a huge chunk of it.
No, that was after he was ambassador to France after the war. Yeah, he was governor.
That's just the musical Hamilton.
Right. Okay. Sorry.
I assume that the line was that the ports, and he was probably going off memory because his teleprompter had dumped him, and he said the airports.
So when this happened, I said to my 11-year-old son, so the president just said that we occupied the airports in the Revolutionary War. And he said, that's not right. And I said, do you understand why that's not right? He goes, yes, because it was 1776. I'm like, all right, very good, very good.
I thought he was going to say yes because the president said it.
That is a decent rule of thumb, but in this case, he had more information.
Well, the truth is that Donald Trump is the living incarnate of Ron Burgundy. If you put it on the teleprompter, he will say it. He doesn't think about what he's saying. And as somebody pointed out, I forget which comedian, some television comedian pointed out, you can tell how Trump is, when he's reading a script, when he repeats a line, he's hearing it for the first time, even though he just said it. And it resonates with him, and that's when he repeats something.
Mm-hmm.
I have issue. I usually take issue with doctors, like medical people who diagnose people without actually meeting them and talking to them and actually, being able to actually make a diagnosis. When a medical professional looks at someone on TV and says, I think it's this. I think it's unprofessional and I think it's unwise. It's just not a good idea for the profession in itself. However, I'm not a doctor. I don't have a license and I can say crazy shit all day because I'm not a doctor. It is something, and someone needs to get in there besides Dr. Crazy Pants who says, oh, he's the perfect male specimen every year. And we as an American people need to see that mental report or even his physical report.
Well, somebody did do a report on him. Justin Amash.
Oh, good segue.
By first saying this isn't the GOP that I know and I respect and I love, and then leaving the GOP this week. So, guys, what do you think? There's been speculation that this could be the launching pad for a 2020 run at the presidency through the Libertarian Party. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if he'd wanted to keep that seat, he would have stayed in the party and tried to fight out the primary. I think he has recognized that the Republican Party is truly completely Trumpified. He managed to stay in it a little longer than I did, because he did not necessarily take the fight to them directly. He would just criticize them obliquely over and over again. But when the Mueller report came out and he actually read it and he said, no, look, there really are problems here. That's when the scales fell from his eyes later than they fell from mine, but they did fall from his eyes and he recognized, no, this thing is irredeemable. I'm out.
I know that there's a lot of Democrats that probably feel some kind of glee when they think about Amash or anybody else running as an independent or a libertarian or a third-party candidate against Trump. I would say be careful what you wish for, because the only way Trump can win in 2020 is if enough people do what they did in 2016 and either don't vote or throw their votes away on protest votes. And my concern is that while Amash was at one point a Republican, he may appeal to people who maybe can't get behind a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris or an Elizabeth Warren. So I would rather have a two-man or two-person race than see third and fourth party candidates mucking up the machinery of a electoral college election.
Yeah, but the thing is, and we went through this argument in 2016, and we obviously still disagree about it because we're going to go through this argument again.
Yes.
Well, of course. But
real debate without the hate.
No, I mean, I get your point, DJ, and I know you get mine, and we're just never going to see eye to eye on it.
No, we're not. We're not, and that's okay because the issue is there are, and I tried to argue this all throughout much of 2016 when I was a Gary Johnson supporter until about a week before the election, is that there are a chunk of voters who will never vote for the Democratic nominee. And the question is, do you want them going back to Donald Trump, which many of them actually did in 2016 for a bunch of reasons, or do you want them parking their vote with a libertarian nominee and therefore their votes don't go to Donald Trump? If you think that everybody who will not vote for Donald Trump will eventually find their way to vote for the Democratic nominee in the absence of an alternative, then you don't want an alternative there. And that's frankly the way Kevin thinks. Kevin assumes that anybody who doesn't vote for Trump will just, they will find a way, they will vote for the Democratic nominee.
Well, predominantly. Not everybody, but predominantly, yes.
I, however, do not share that view because I have actually seen it where a lot of folks who, again, the question is, there are voters out there who simply will never vote for the Democratic nominee, and I do not want them voting for Donald Trump. I want to give them an alternative where at least, if we're not going to get their full vote for the Democratic nominee, we at least get their half vote because they don't vote for Donald Trump either. The fact of the matter is, among voters in 2016 who did not like either candidate, who did not like Trump and who did not like Clinton, Donald Trump won those voters by over 20 points. And the reason Donald Trump won those voters by such a wide margin was because they were told, in part because they were told over and over again that they couldn't vote for Gary Johnson and they couldn't vote for Evan McMullin because it was a two-person race and the only people they could really vote for were either Clinton or Trump. And their response was, okay, fine, if those are the only two people I can vote for, I'll vote for Trump. Now, it is a very difficult line to play. It's a very difficult line to use. But frankly, if you're dealing with a voter who says, I can never vote for the Democratic nominee ever, then in my opinion, we have to accept that and go, okay, fine. What do you think about Justin Amash, the libertarian candidate, if he is a libertarian candidate?
So let's talk about the Democratic race for the 2020 nomination. It moved on this week with a lot of infighting over whether undocumented immigrants, or rather undocumented immigration, should be decriminalized. Guys, do you think that this is an issue that the Democrats want to proverbially hang their swords on?
They will all die on this hill if they want to bring it up. This is one they should try to avoid as much as possible.
Well, first of all, where do you guys fall on this question? We know that about 12 of the 20 Democrats who were in the two debates did say that they were for decriminalizing, at least on the criminal level, not on the civil level, undocumented immigration, what is euphemistically called illegal immigration. What do you guys think?
Well, to begin with, illegally crossing the border, being a person who crosses the border without proper documentation, is a misdemeanor on par with speeding in a national park. So in stark realistic terms and stark legal terms, it's like waiving the fine on a speeding ticket to decriminalize it. It's not actually a major proposal. However, this is it's pandering to the base. It wouldn't have a major policy effect one way or another. And it's television fodder. It's not even that interesting a policy proposal.
Greg, what do you think?
I think it scares everyone to say it's not so much that it's that much of a policy change. It's the term open borders. Okay. Those terms like that, even in the Midwest, which I have to say, I know you're close to borders. You see immigration issues that I've never even dreamed of. I know family members who swear they have illegals under their bed every day, stealing their Medicaid every day.
Have they looked under their beds? Like, did they shine a flashlight under there?
Every night they shine and they say, "Oh my gosh, these illegals."
Oh well, I mean, if they're actually seeing illegals under there, there's nothing I can do about it. But if they were to look under their bed and discover it was empty, would that perhaps persuade them that this wasn't happening?
But the point being, terms like open borders scare everybody. And in a election year where so much is riding, I think it's a bad idea to use those phrases.
Well, hang on, Greg. Hang on. First of all, the folks who are using open borders are the policy's critics, the ones who are insisting that unauthorized immigration must be criminal. No one in the Democratic Party is talking about open borders. They're talking about decriminalizing unauthorized immigration. So I am not going to feel the need to defend a phrase that I don't really use and that no Democrat actually running for president actually uses.
Right. No Democrat uses it. I agree.
Right. So in terms of whether or not decriminalization of unauthorized immigration is a good policy, frankly, I do think it is a good policy. But I do recognize that it may not necessarily be politically saleable.
Right.
And what I would like to see, what I would love to see, is I would love to see more candidates decide that the consultants who tell them when you're explaining you're losing should be fired and kicked to the curb. I don't think that the American people are so stupid that they can't accept candidates for office explaining things to them. I don't think the American people are so stupid that they can't be sold a policy that they may not have heard before.
Well, DJ, based on what you just said, then there's no problem with Bernie Sanders being the nominee for the Democratic Party, because surely he could explain democratic socialism and how he plans on paying for Medicare for all to the American people. So there's no problem, right?
Except that his explanations are wrong. The explanation for decriminalization of unauthorized immigration is right. If you explain the wrong thing, the American people will see through and go, wait, your explanation is wrong.
Well, actually, no. His explanation of democratic socialism, probably on paper and according to political scientists, would be correct.
No, according to political scientists, they're not correct. From the ones that I follow on Twitter, look at him and basically say, no, what he's talking about is social democracy. 2, he's mis-explaining social democracy in Europe. Most people who are in the social democracy in Europe will look at how he describes it and go, what? What the hell are you talking about?
I kind of think that this discussion is maybe proving my point in its mere existence, in that we're right now having a big argument over what Bernie stands for, whether it's saleable, whether it can be explained. I'm not disagreeing with you, although I actually do disagree on the wisdom of decriminalizing illegal immigration. But my bigger concern, because I could go either way on it, I don't have a strong preference. My bigger concern is in 2020, given where a large segment of the electorate is, which is they have a strong predilection against illegal immigration, I feel it's a bad issue to run on. Look, I believe that gun control is the right thing to do. I don't think the Democrats should run on it because it's a losing issue in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and other Midwestern states. In fact, in a lot of states. And I feel the same thing about this issue. You want to run on, look, we would all love to, have Jesus Christ as our nominee and, the right thing would win out every time. Unfortunately, we saw in 2016 that it's just the opposite.
I think we saw in 33 AD that it doesn't necessarily work.
Point taken. And touche to you. Salute, my friend.
I'm not saying that decriminalization of unauthorized immigration is a winning issue. And I actually, Kevin, I think we may agree that we may be more towards violent agreement than disagreement on the politics of that. I'm just not so sure it is as damaging as an issue as people may fear it is. And in part because I'm looking at different swing voters. I do not think, and this is again, I think all 5 major Democratic nominee, the one that have a shot at being nominated, Biden, Sanders, Warren, Harris, and Buttigieg, they're all looking for the swing voters in the wrong place. They're looking in the Wonder Bread white Midwest. They should be looking in the Sun Belt, Arizona, Florida, North Carolina. They have different views on immigration. They don't have different views on gun rights, but they have different views on immigration. They're not necessarily going to be as upset about decriminalization of unauthorized immigration as, say, those Wonder Bread white Midwestern voters who, frankly, are not going to vote for us in 2020 because they voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and that's it. They're going down on the racist ship. But that's just me.
Okay, so let's now turn to the candidates who are running. Joe Biden infamously has now apologized for his comments of about a month ago where he was talking about some segregationists. It drives me nuts. I just have to say parenthetically, I watched Meet the Press this morning, and Chuck Todd, who I normally like and respect, drove me freaking nuts when he said Biden apologized for praising segregationists. He never praised them. Biden says in every statement he never praised them. And it drives me nuts when in the name of shorthanding a headline, the press gets it so violently wrong.
Oh, they do that stuff all the time, though. And that's, yeah. I'm not defending that.
Yes, they do.
What I'm saying is, Kevin, what I'm trying to say is, Kevin, you will live far longer if instead of reacting with anger, you react with bitter laughter. You'll live far longer because it's going to happen a lot more often. The fact of the matter is the National Press Corps is not really smarter than the rest of us. The people who run polls are not really smarter than the rest of us. I'll get on that rant later. But yes, Chuck Todd making a dumb mistake like that's going to happen a lot more often than it's not. Rely on bitter laughter to get you through.
I just love that your life advice, and you may not be wrong, but I'm just laughing at the fact that your life advice is don't be angry, be bitter.
Bitter.
For a happy life. It's not a happy wife makes a happy life. It's be bitter, don't be angry.
Yeah, I actually think that's our title. Be bitter, not angry.
Bitter is better.
Well, Joe isn't bitter yet, so he apologized. Cory Booker apparently is happy because he seems to have accepted Vice President Biden's apology. Where does the rest of the gang stand? I think Kamala is, and is it Kamala or Kamala?
It's Kamala. It's like Pamela with a K.
Oh, thank you. That's a good way to remember it. So Kamala.
Yeah. And I say that I knew a young woman named Kamala years and years ago, and that's how she would pronounce it, and how she would explain pronouncing it. Also, I met Kamala Harris once, and she shook my hand and said, "Oh, hi, I'm Kamala." So I'm going with her.
Like Camelot. Okay.
Like Camelot with no T.
I'm sorry, but in actuality, the proper pronunciation for the senator from California running for president is Marco Rubio, because that's who she's emulating.
Ooh, I want to hear more about that, and I will come back to you on that. I promise. But I want to finish. I want to be clean on one topic. So I had mentioned Joe Biden.
I will lie in wait.
So what do you guys think? First of all, Kamala has been proven this week to actually share essentially the same position on busing that Joe Biden talked about in their debate about 2 weeks ago, that they both believe it is an instrument for integration, but forced busing in and of itself is not a panacea. So why is this issue still haunting him when they agree?
Because debates are not good platforms for nuanced discussion, and Kamala scored the point in the that round.
Okay, how is this going to? I mean, we've all seen the polls now. Joe Biden's numbers have deflated somewhat. Kamala and Warren have gone up in the polls quite a bit. Sanders seems to have remained flat, maybe pulled back a little bit. So where does everything stand now? Because I have a sense this is actually not going to work to her long-term benefit. Although I do think that she's now a player where maybe she wasn't before the debates. So I have a feeling that there's going to be a little bit of a backlash against her in the coming weeks.
Of course there's going to be a backlash against her. Everybody gets their moment in the press, Sun, and where all the headlines are fawning on them and they get their bump in the polls and everyone says, is this their moment? And then, we discover something about them, like, they don't like chocolate ice cream. And suddenly the press turns on them. It is a cycle. It happens over and over again. We've seen it with Buttigieg. We've seen it with Warren. We've seen it with Biden. And Biden still remains the person to beat if the polls are to be believed. And yes, there are going to be people who are bitter and angry that anyone scored points on him. And we just have to kind of sit it out and let it happen and not hyperanalyze every single exchange.
Yeah. Do you remember when Beto was on the cover of Vanity Fair and he was doing, all these speeches on tables?
He is dreamy.
Oh, yes, he's dreamy. But Beto was like the flavor of the week, and he was great, and we all had high hopes. And then he kept saying things like, you know what, I'm going to listen to people. I'm going to do some listening. And that was his big phrase. And people would say, what do you think about, Syria? And he'd say, I think by listening. And that was his, someone commented on our website that if I keep, that all my comments on Beto were really crappy and I should stop picking on him. But it's so easy.
So I want to go back to the polls. There was a Washington Post, I believe ABC poll that came out just a couple of days ago that showed that Donald Trump's popularity is actually a little bit higher than it has been over the, previous, let's say 6 months, that his position may be solidifying a little bit amongst his base and the GOP. And yet he is still vulnerable to be defeated in 2020. But the candidate who is still running strongest against him by a margin of 10 points nationally is Joe Biden, whereas all of the other Democratic candidates are still either 1 or 2 points ahead of Trump in that poll, which is within the margin of error, or essentially tied with him. That is a big data point for me, frankly. It still informs my first choice of Joe Biden being the nominee. But again, I throw it out to you guys. Is it too early? Because again, all we have to go on is our feelings and data. Our feelings are 50% of it. Data is 50% of it. And the data is telling us that Joe is still the strongest candidate.
Joe is still the strongest candidate.
Yeah.
Joe has a lot going for him. He also has the ability to open his mouth, insert both of his feet and one of his elbows, and sound like, some sort of dopey drunk person. But
let's get back to the data. The data is telling us that Americans are still ready to elect him president.
And that doesn't bother me.
It is very early to look at this kind of thing and to make ironclad conclusions. I think there are issues with all of the major five. Yes, Biden has the tendency to be a gaffe machine. That's less of a problem in 2020 than it would have been in, say, 2000 or 2008. I think Warren is too far to the left on numerous economic issues that will hurt with Sunbelt swing voters. I think that's Sanders' problem as well. I think Kamala Harris is trying to be all things to all people and all things to all Democrats. That's why I slapped the Marco Rubio label on her earlier, because he tried to be all things to all Republicans and he twisted himself in knots and he got run over by Trump. I fear Harris will suffer the same fate because she can't land on one position to stay firm on it. She has talked about supporting Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All and then supporting private insurance. Those two things are completely incompatible.
Absolutely. And I just want to build on that. This bullshit of, it's like Medicare Advantage. No, in Bernie's plan, there is no Medicare Advantage. So I don't know what she is talking about.
Also true. Exactly. And that is the kind of thing that sank Rubio because he tried to be all things to all primary voters and it didn't work because all primary voters these days talk to each other. So I fear that Harris will suffer the same fate. As for Buttigieg, we'll get into Buttigieg issues later, maybe in a different time. But again, that's my issue with Harris. And frankly, she proved on the busing issue. She bashed Joe Biden for a position that he held on busing that she adopted less than a week later. That kind of political twist doesn't work in the 21st century. Voters, as as dumb as we may think some voters are, the average Democratic primary voter is too knowledgeable not to see through that kind of thing.
Okay, see, I'll go the exact opposite. I think the reason Biden is 10 points and everyone else is 1 or 2 points is that, one, there's too many damn people running. Okay, Greg,
I'm going to let you finish your thought, but I want to just address that. These are one-on-one, head-to-head matchups.
These are one-on-one, exactly. These are still one-on-one.
So I don't see how Michael Bennett running has any effect on whether Kamala Harris does well in a head-to-head matchup with Donald Trump.
Just wait. Okay. With 20 plus people. Okay. We know Joe Biden. We've known Uncle Joe for like the past, 12 years or something. And in fact, for some of us, even longer. We know Joe Biden, but we've had 20 some odd candidates. How well do any of us know all 20 of them? Okay. We've had a couple weeks here, a couple weeks here, a couple weeks. And every time we get to know a new candidate pops up. Okay. Nobody really, except for like Bernie, and those Bernie fans love Bernie.
Yes, and he still is, beating Trump, I think, by a point, which is a statistical tie. Elizabeth Warren has been on the scene for almost 12 years. People know her. Kamala Harris got the best press you could get for the last couple of weeks. Don't tell me that the American people don't know who Kamala Harris is.
No.
I'm sorry, Greg.
They don't.
I'm going to call BS on this point. This idea that Joe is only winning because people know his name, and I'm air quoting
name recognition
on that.
is
we got to get
huge.
beyond that. I've heard this since March of this year. It's no longer true. People know who these people are. They know who Bernie Sanders is. He's still not beating Trump. So please don't tell me that 10-point lead is all name recognition.
Bernie Sanders isn't beating Trump because people know who Bernie Sanders is.
That's
they know
my
who he is
point.
and they don't like him.
Yes, and maybe that's true with Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris. Maybe people don't like those people.
Right. Well, Kamala Harris. I said that wrong, didn't I? Kamala Harris. I'll get that right by the time she gets into the White House. The point being is people get to know her when there's only like 4 or 5 candidates left.
Okay, Greg, people know who Bernie Sanders is. People know who Elizabeth Warren is.
And don't
after
like
the last
them.
3 weeks, a good 85% of the country knows who Kamala Harris is.
Right.
Now, let's go back to something DJ said. DJ, I think where you and I see the 2020 election differently, probably in a few different areas, but you said something that I found, it helped me to understand you better. Not that you haven't articulated this before, but I think you articulated it cleanest for me just now. You see the focal point of the election being that Democrats need to do better in the South. Specifically, you mentioned North Carolina, Florida, and Arizona. You see those apparently as 3 states that the Democrats can win and should win. Correct?
I think, yes, I see them as better opportunities than, say, the Trump voters in the Midwestern states that you talk about. I'm not willing to say that those states are lost. I do think that the right Democrat could win Pennsylvania and Michigan and possibly Wisconsin, but I think that going for Arizona, Florida, and North Carolina would be better for the party long term, better for the party in 2020, and I think they would find that the minor party votes in those Midwestern states, particularly the Johnson voters, would be more likely to go to a Democrat who is looking at the freer trade, the economic conservative, the suburbanite voters in those 3 Sunbelt states.
Okay, so I agree with you that I think a good chunk of the Obama to Trump converts are gone. Not all of them, but maybe more than half, maybe 60%, maybe 70% are gone. So we're essentially in agreement there. I think where Clinton lost the election is in people that didn't vote or voted for a third party candidate in 2016 instead of voting for the Democrat. And those are the voters that I would like to see the party go after. And yes, I still think that Pennsylvania is, for me, the bellwether. So as this nominating process, as this primary process goes on, I'm going to be honing in whenever there's a poll in Pennsylvania, either between the candidates or a head-to-head matchup against Trump. I want to see where those numbers are because, as I've said on this podcast before, I believe that Michigan was a statistical anomaly. We lost it by about 9,500 or maybe 10,500 votes. And that's because hundreds of thousands of dedicated Democratic voters simply did not show up. Just in Detroit alone, I think there was well into the six figures of people who just didn't show up, probably because they thought that Clinton was a shoo-in and she didn't need their votes. Wisconsin, I think, might be a little bit more of a challenge, but I still feel fairly confident that if we give Wisconsin voters someone that they can identify with, someone who's for middle-class values, who talks about economic issues, and that they can identify with, I think that they're going to come back into the Democratic fold. To me, the election will be won or lost in Pennsylvania. I don't think that any blue state other than those three, and I'm going to add Virginia in because, as I've said before, I'm not 100% sure about Virginia. You're more sanguine on Virginia than I am, DJ. But other than those four states, there is an important state that went blue that I think is in danger of going red in 2020. We could talk maybe Nevada. Who knows? It depends again on who the Democrats nominate. But that's 6 electoral votes. So I'm not worried about losing blue states that we already hold. I'm worried about winning back states that we need to win the Electoral College. It would be great to be more competitive in North Carolina if that's possible. It would be great to be more competitive in Florida. But as we saw in 2018 with Gilliam's loss and with Nelson's loss in the Senate race, Florida just feels like it's getting more and more red, even though in our hearts and minds it shouldn't be. And then again, going after Arizona, frankly, that was the big fish that Hillary tried to nab in the final days of the 2016 election, which may have cost her some electoral votes because she spent too much time trying to flip Arizona when she should have been shoring up Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So I really think that Democrats need to look at who can win Pennsylvania. And that brings us back to everybody's somewhat favorite uncle, Joe Biden, who I think will always be more aligned with Pennsylvania voters than Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg. Again, just my opinion.
And the irony here is, Kevin, that despite our disagreement on perspective, our disagreement on geographical priorities and everything, is probably going to be held under the belief that you and I will both come to, is that assuming the candidates this race goes as I think it will, I will end up in a position where I will likely be forced to support Joe Biden, because among the 5 candidates I talked to, particularly among the big 4, Biden, Sanders, Harris, and Warren, Biden is the only one who is more willing to defend freer trade. He's the one who has greater foreign policy experience. He talks more about our alliances than others, although Harris is trying to catch up. But of those 4, Biden would actually be the one more likely to build on the gains that Senator Sinema gave us in Arizona, more likely to build on what Gillum and Nelson tried to do in Florida, more likely to build on the votes we actually got in North Carolina that got gerrymandered into minorities at the congressional and state legislative levels, because as part of the Obama administration, Biden is more to the right on economic issues than, frankly, all of those other 3 candidates currently nipping at his heels. But again, the question is going to be, when I look at Pennsylvania, for example, I want to see who can run up the score in Delaware and Chester County, who can run up the score in Allegheny County outside of Pittsburgh, who can run up the score, who can actually hold on to the gains that Hillary Clinton made in Bucks County. When I look at, say, Michigan or Wisconsin, I'm looking at, say, the gains that were made in 2018. And again, it's 2018 that I think should help us in examining this in terms of if we have the right candidate, then Virginia should fall into line because we flipped 2 Trump districts in 2018 here. then Arizona would look very good because not only did Kristen Sinema win the Senate seat, but we also won a majority of the congressional delegation in Arizona. The candidate who ran against Kristen Sinema, Ms. McSally, her congressional seat actually flipped from Republican to Democrat under her as she was running for the United States Senate. So it's a matter of, again, this is just an example of when you get to candidates and platforms and such. Again, Kevin and I have different priorities, we have different focuses, but assuming that the other minor candidates go after Iowa and New Hampshire, we may end up coming towards the same decision.
The same conclusion for different reasons.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
And Rebecca, DJ and I have kind of hogged the mic a little bit the last 10 minutes, but what are you thinking?
That we have.
Oh, was I supposed to listen to you guys?
No.
We've been playing cards over here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. I think DJ's right about Arizona. I think Kevin is right about Pennsylvania. But I also
that is a diplomatic answer.
Well, because none of this is wrong. These are states that are winnable and should be areas of focus. And I'm hoping that the pollsters
she is actually teeing us up to put the driver to us, Kevin.
To tell us why it should be Kristen Gillibrand.
Here's the thing that neither of you are going to like me saying, but Greg's about to be my new best friend. As goes Ohio, so goes the nation. That has been true in elections dating back hundreds of years. So we have to think about the white bread Midwest to some degree as well. There are a lot of needles to thread. Right now, Joe Biden is positioned better than anyone else to thread them simply because he has been working at it the longest and has the most experience and, yes, the most name recognition. But Joe Biden is also really good at what he does, except for the parts where he has to campaign. He's lousy at that.
Yeah, but let me add to that, though. We have a president who just talked about airports in 1776. We're kind of past flubs, aren't we?
Yeah, Joe. But some of the flubs that Joe Biden is making aren't gaffes like, they aren't malapropisms. They aren't him misspeaking in the moment. He is making sort of substantive problems. His record is being called out, and instead of acknowledging and moving on, he is becoming defensive. Not that he is defending, but he is becoming defensive. And that is not a good stance for any politician to be in. It's one thing to say, yeah, I took that vote. It was the best I could do at the time. It would be different if I knew what I knew now. He is not doing that. He doubles down on things and gets really sort of agitated about it, and it's not a good thing to look at. And he needs to let that go. He needs to just let his record stand as what it is and not try and defend it or over-explain it.
Okay, so let's come to a new segment, and we're going to close with something that we call Talking Points for Morons. Where we dispel a stupid meme that has captured our imaginations this week.
So this popped up on my Facebook, and it actually, I'll be honest, it was my mother put it on her account.
We're not calling her a moron.
No. So the meme said, "Don't you find it funny that Democrats voted to fine Americans for not buying health insurance, but want to give it to illegal immigrants for free?" And then that's it. It's sort of like mic drop.
Well, why is that wrong?
Well, it's kind of you're literally comparing two different proposals, like from 12 years apart, and two different programs. And one was a step towards the other. So one was in 2009, the first one. It was the Obamacare, and one is now. So yeah, you're right. They did vote in 2000. It eventually was 2010 when it passed, and now, almost 10 years later, was the second one. It's an evolution of our healthcare system, which was eventually moving where a lot of them towards like a universal or single payer system.
This is why we lost Ohio, and why we'll lose Ohio again, and we're not going to pay attention to Ohio in 2020, because that was exactly the wrong way to explain it, Greg.
Oh, really? Oh, please,
yes.
Help me out here. Well, then this is... okay, tell me why.
Because it is Donald Trump and the Republicans who are insisting that unauthorized immigrants get free health care, and it's for this reason.
Tell me.
so long as they remain unauthorized, so long as they remain quote unquote illegal, they are not in a position where the mandate applies to them. Once they become legal immigrants, authorized immigrants, as a Democrats' immigration reform package would provide for them, then they would be in a position where the mandate would apply to them, and they would need to buy health insurance or pay the tax on the non-insurance tax, because the government would actually know who they are and would be able to extract that fine from them if they don't acquire health insurance because they are taxpayers. It is the fact that they are unauthorized and that it is harder for the IRS to identify them that they get quote unquote health care for free. If they were legal or authorized immigrants on a path to citizenship, then when the mandate existed, the mandate would have also applied to them. It is Republicans who insist on outdated, unenforceable, draconian immigration law that keeps these people in the shadows, that keeps them unauthorized. That is what keeps them from falling under the insurance mandate, and that is what allows them to get, quote, health care for free, unquote. That's the problem, not anything that the Democrats are doing.
By health care for free, are they talking about Medicaid?
No.
Like, is that what they think is going to happen?
No, this is the question when they asked at the debate.
Oh, if they should be covered. All right.
But here's the thing. In the debate, I sensed that there was kind of a fissure there. I think everybody wants to give medical care to people in crisis, regardless of their citizenship or even legal status. That's different than saying they get the full plate of coverage that would come with a new healthcare plan. You know, a few people have said, yes, we should have more clinics. People talk about the emergency room. What I think the Democrats were saying in their bumbling, tongue-tied way was, we want to make sure that everyone has access to the medical care that they need to stay alive. That doesn't mean that we're talking about unlimited MRIs for every undocumented immigrant that happens to cross the border. Am I wrong?
I think that's what you get. I mean, if you go on social media, you'll always find stories of people who happen to be in a European country and became ill, and they find themselves in an emergency room and being hospitalized for whatever condition they have. Say it's an appendicitis and they need to have an emergency surgery, and they pay some ridiculously low amount of money, like $17, for the entirety of their stay, because the national healthcare system, whatever it is, has blanket protections for people in emergency situations who aren't necessarily participants in the national healthcare scheme. And I think that's what the Democrats are getting at, that we as a nation should have a certain amount of coverage for everyone. Like, you walk into a hospital, you can get the care you need regardless of your ability to pay, which is a thing that already exists.
And that is the existing policy and was even before Obamacare.
That is the existing policy. And we talk about that as if it's a new idea, and it's not a new idea. It's called EMTALA. It's the Emergency Medical Transfer and Labor Act. And it's been in existence since years before Obamacare. So, you know, everyone wants that, and everyone wants you to be able to take your kid in for a flu shot and to get their vaccine so they can go to school and all of that stuff. However, as Kevin said, the full slate of services might not be available to you if you are not a policy holder under what is defined as insurance under Obamacare, which for the moment defines what insurance is.
And let's be honest. If we were talking about immigrants from Norway or Sweden, these people would not care what their status of authorization is, would they?
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy what we do here, please check out our website, mpupodcast.com, and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/moreperfectunionpodcast, and share our link on your Facebook timeline so your friends can find out how cool we are too. And if you can't get enough of me, and frankly, who can get enough of me? I ask you to check out another podcast that I was on this past week. It's called the Inspired Money Podcast, hosted by Andrew Wang. He and I did a sit-down interview, and if you want to find out more about my background and how I got financial freedom, you'll want to listen to that. And if you like political debate like this and would like to debate with us between shows, join us in our Facebook group, Open Fire Politics, or you can join Open Fire Sex and Relationships, Open Fire Entertainment, or Open Fire Food and Fitness. They're all places where you can discuss and contrast your thoughts with like-minded people, and we'd love to see you there too. Folks, what's on tap for your week?
I will be actually in High Point, North Carolina this week for Con Carolinas. I will be there through the weekend, and in fact, I will be recording my contribution to next week's podcast from the hotel room Sunday night.
Oh, will you now? The producer is always the last to know.